Every object in this world carries its own story, its unique history. But some things possess a dark power that defies understanding. These objects are cursed, bringing doom upon anyone who dares to own them, demanding a price paid in blood and soul. Would you dare to touch them? Today, we'll uncover the cursed objects, things that not only bring death but serve as gateways to realms beyond human reach. Brace yourself, as these tales will make you rethink everything you see around you. So, are you ready? Follow me into the world of these dangerous artifacts, where every antique could become your worst nightmare. Story 1. The Haunted Wedding Dress in the 1840s. In the town of Altoona, Pennsylvania, a wealthy family named Baker lived in a grand mansion, exerting significant influence over the area. Anna Baker, the family's only daughter, was raised in luxury but was deeply unhappy. Her free-spirited nature clashed with the authoritarian character of her father, Elias Baker, who would go to great lengths to control her life. At the age of 18, Anna fell in love with a young, handsome blacksmith from a lower social class. Their love blossomed passionately, despite Elias's opposition. Upon discovering the romance, Elias ordered the couple to separate and threatened to ruin the blacksmith's life if they continued to meet. Forced into submission, Anna lived in despair and resentment. Still, Anna prepared for her wedding day by commissioning a beautiful wedding dress, a pure white gown adorned with intricate lace details and a long train, symbolizing her hope for freedom and marriage one day. However, that dream never came true. Elias thwarted every opportunity for Anna, and she never got to wear the dress. Anna spent her final years in solitude and bitterness, passing away in her room where the wedding dress remained hanging, a silent reminder of her forbidden love and sorrowful life. From then on, rumors spread that Anna's spirit had haunted the dress, and anyone who touched it faced tragedy. Clare Daniels and the Church Death, 1936. Clare Daniels, a beautiful young woman in Altoona, was preparing for her wedding when she visited the Baker Mansion Museum for inspiration. There, she saw Anna's wedding dress displayed in a glass case. Captivated by its exquisite beauty, Clare hired a tailor to recreate the dress for her big day. A few days after trying on the replica dress at home, Clare began experiencing strange phenomena. At first, she felt an inexplicable chill whenever she touched the gown, despite the summer heat. Later, she dreamed of a woman in a wedding dress standing by a window, staring out with mournful eyes. Clare, whispering to her mother, "Mom, I think there's something wrong with this dress. I feel like someone is watching me whenever I'm near it." Her mother dismissed her concerns as pre-wedding jitters, but the dreams persisted, becoming more vivid. In the final dream before her wedding, Clare saw herself in a dark room, where Anna Baker appeared and whispered, "This dress doesn't belong to you. Give it back to me." On her wedding day, Clare walked into the church wearing the stunning gown, her face pale and her eyes uneasy. As she moved down the aisle, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the candles, and she felt an invisible force choking her. She collapsed, leaving the guests in shock. Clare's husband screaming, "Somebody help her! Clare, are you okay?" But Clare didn't respond. She lay motionless on the floor, her face frozen in fear. Doctors could not determine the cause of death. After the funeral, the dress was returned to the museum, continuing to fuel eerie tales. Linda Morris in the Haunted Room, 1975. Linda Morris, a historian passionate about antique items, became intrigued by Anna Baker's wedding dress. She obtained permission to borrow it from the museum for research. On the first night of bringing the dress home, Linda heard sobbing from her study, where the dress was hung. Thinking she was overtired, she ignored it, but the sobbing returned the following night. Checking the room, Linda saw the silhouette of a woman in a wedding gown standing with her back turned. Linda, trembling, Who are you?" When she switched on the light, the figure vanished, but the wedding dress lay on the floor. Despite her certainty, she had hung it carefully. Linda began suspecting the dress harbored a sinister energy. A few nights later, Linda dreamed she was wearing the dress, standing before a large mirror. Instead of her reflection, she saw Anna Baker's face in the glass. Anna smirked coldly, her dark eyes threatening to consume her. Waking in terror, Linda found claw marks on her arms, as if someone had tried to drag her into darkness. Frightened, she promptly returned the dress to the museum. Anna Baker's wedding dress is not just a symbol of a broken love story, but also carries a haunting curse. From ominous dreams to inexplicable deaths, it continues to spread terror to anyone who dares to interact with it. Is this Anna's vengeful spirit at work, or a melancholic reminder of the tragedies caused by forbidden love? Story 2. The Hope Diamond, a cycle of tragedy. The Hope Diamond, one of the most famous diamonds in the world, is renowned not only for its dazzling beauty and striking color, but also for its haunting curse. Its story began in the 17th century in India, where it was mined from a gemstone quarry, originally named the Blue Diamond. It was a simple gem until a French trader brought it to Europe in the late 1600s. The curse tied to the diamond is said to originate from an Indian goddess whose idol was desecrated when the gem was taken. Legend has it that whoever possessed the diamond had committed a grave sin, leading to a centuries-long curse of death and tragedy for all its owners. Over the centuries, the Hope Diamond passed through many hands, becoming not just a valuable gem, but also a symbol of death and destruction. Everyone who owned the diamond paid a heavy price, from mysterious murders to eerie deaths. The tragedy of Lord Hope, 1830. One of the most infamous stories surrounding the Hope Diamond is that of Lord Hope, a British nobleman in the 1830s. After purchasing the diamond from a merchant in India, he became the victim of a series of strange and tragic events. One cold winter night, Lord Hope sat in his study at Hope Castle, gazing at the diamond under the soft glow of an oil lamp. Suddenly, he heard a sigh echoing from the end of the hallway. His mind reeled, but he dismissed it as the wind whistling through cracks in the doors. Yet, as he stepped out to investigate, an eerie silence engulfed the surroundings. When he returned to his study, he saw a shadowy figure standing beside the desk where the diamond lay. Lord Hope? Is someone there? I heard footsteps, but there's no one. Why? Frozen in fear, Lord Hope stared at the faint shadow, a chill coursing down his spine. The figure vanished instantly, leaving behind an inexplicable sense of dread. Lord Hope dismissed the incident, thinking the diamond posed no real threat. However, strange occurrences soon began to unfold. A week later, in the dead of night, Lord Hope awoke feeling an unusual presence. A thick scent of jasmine filled his room. When he rose to light a lamp, the glow illuminated a horrifying sight. His beloved servant, whom he regarded as a friend, lay lifeless on his bed, his eyes wide with terror and lips moving faintly, as though trying to convey a warning. Servant, don't keep it. The diamond, it will kill you. Unable to comprehend these words, Lord Hope grew increasingly anxious. The servant's death was just the beginning of a series of bizarre tragedies that would follow. Over time, those closest to him died under mysterious and inexplicable circumstances. Finally convinced of the diamond's curse, he was overwhelmed by dread. Lord Hope, I can't bear it anymore. Everything is happening too fast. I can't explain it. Someone, help me. In 1838, during a stormy night, Lord Hope was found dead in his study. His body lay contorted on the floor, his eyes wide open in terror. On the desk, the diamond gleamed, untouched, but surrounded by a streak of blood trailing down to the floor, as if it had devoured his soul. The tale of the diamond's curse spread far and wide. Curious souls seeking to own it couldn't ignore its ominous glow. Yet, one thing was clear. Lord Hope's death was just another chapter in the diamond's endless saga of horror. Evelyn McKinley, Hollywood and the Curse, 1940s. Nearly a century after Lord Hope's demise, the Hope Diamond resurfaced, this time in the possession of Evelyn McKinley, a famous Hollywood actress of the 1940s. Evelyn, during a grand party at her mansion, proudly showcased the Hope Diamond she had recently acquired. But its presence soon plunged her into a series of eerie, inescapable events. The party at McKinley's mansion. That evening, Evelyn's mansion was filled with light and laughter. Guests were astonished to see Evelyn wearing the dazzling Hope diamond around her neck. She proudly flaunted her new possession, dismissing the tales of its curse. Evelyn McKinley, enthusiastically, "Isn't it beautiful? This is the legendary cursed diamond everyone talks about. But I don't believe in such nonsense." Her words were met with a peculiar silence. Suddenly, a strange noise echoed from the garden. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared speak. Evelyn tried to remain composed, yet a cold chill crept over her. Despite the summer heat, the following day, Evelyn awoke gripped by an overwhelming sense of dread. Her nights became haunted by vivid nightmares of a mysterious woman who repeated the same chilling phrase, "Return what was stolen." Exhaustion and anxiety consumed her. "Evelyn, I can't sleep. I can't eat. Something is coming for me, and I can't escape it. Please, someone help." After the party, Evelyn's dreams grew more horrifying. She envisioned a disfigured woman dressed in traditional Indian attire, her face charred and twisted, murmuring incomprehensible curses. Each time Evelyn awoke, the diamond inexplicably lay on her pillow, though she remembered removing it before bed. A month later, Evelyn McKinley vanished without a trace. Her mansion was abandoned, and the Hope diamond was discovered on her bedroom table, a grim reminder of the curse it bore. The Hope diamond is not just a sparkling gem, but the embodiment of a terrifying curse. From Lord Hope to Evelyn McKinley, everyone who dared to possess it paid with their lives. These chilling stories endure, turning the Hope diamond into a symbol of fear, leaving anyone who speaks of it shivering in unease. Story 3. The Haunted Mirror. This mirror is far from an ordinary item. It has existed for over 3 centuries and is believed to have passed through the hands of countless generations of families who once owned it. According to legend, this mirror was handcrafted by a skilled blacksmith in Venice during the 17th century. The blacksmith, a man named Alessandro Viti, created it as a wedding gift for his new bride. However, what he didn't know was that the mirror wasn't merely a tool for reflection. Viti had a friend who was an adventurer. This friend told him a strange tale about a sorcerer in India who had used dark magic to turn the mirror into an object capable of glimpsing into other worlds. During a ritual, the sorcerer inadvertently left a ghostly imprint on the mirror, causing anyone who looked into it to be drawn into terrifying visions of the past or future. Thus, the mirror became more than just a reflective surface. It was a gateway to shadowy realms where the restless spirits of the dead lingered. Since its creation, the mirror's owners began to experience strange occurrences. Every family it passed faced inexplicable tragedies, from mysterious deaths to the sudden disappearances of family members. The Richmond family story, 1880. By the late 19th century, the haunted mirror found its way into the hands of a wealthy family in England. The Richmonds, they purchased it at an auction, unaware of its sinister history. At first, the mirror was placed in their living room, admired as a valuable decorative piece. But soon, strange events began to unfold. One evening, the Richmond family hosted a dinner party at their mansion. As guests sat around the dining table, one of them, Charles, a close friend of Mr. Richmond, noticed something unusual in the mirror. When he stood before it, his reflection became distorted and grotesque. His face turned pale, and his eyes sank deep into his skull, as though someone was staring at him from behind. Charles, shuddering, speaking to the family, I don't understand. In the mirror, I saw someone behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one." At first, everyone in the room laughed, thinking Charles was imagining things. But moments later, the mirror began to glow eerily. The room's light dimmed abruptly, as if the mirror was absorbing all the brightness. Richmond family startled, looking at each other. "What's happening? Why is the mirror? I don't know. We need to stop this immediately." After the dinner, the sense of unease only grew stronger. The mirror's reflections became increasingly bizarre and incomprehensible. The Richmond family started encountering unexplainable events. Weeks later, things took a darker turn. Late at night, The family heard heavy breaths and the shuffle of footsteps echoing in the hallways. Nighttime became a nightmare as the mirrors showed not just the family's reflections, but also ghostly apparitions. One night, their daughter Mary ventured into the living room to retrieve something. When she glanced at the mirror, she saw her reflection, only it wasn't quite her. Her face appeared menacing and ghastly. A cold hand reached out from the mirror and grabbed her. Pulling her in, Mary vanished instantly. The family frantically searched for her, but found no trace. Mary, screaming from within the mirror, "Mother, Father, help me. No, let me out." The next day, the family discovered a small, hastily written note in Mary's room. The mirror is not just a reflection. It is a door to death. Ultimately, the mirror was abandoned in a deserted house, where anyone brave enough to enter reported feeling a haunting presence, an icy stare, and the heavy breathing of trapped souls. RachelWhitmores Story, 1930. The haunted mirror continued its dark legacy into the 1930s when a woman named Rachel Whitmore purchased it at an auction in London. Rachel, an art researcher, was captivated by the mirror's exquisite craftsmanship and had no inkling of the curse it carried. After bringing the mirror home, she quickly noticed something strange. Placed in her study, the mirror seemed ordinary at first. However, each time Rachel looked into it, she saw faint, shadowy figures behind her reflection. Occasionally, she glimpsed the silhouette of a man in old-fashioned attire, standing silently as though waiting to pounce. Rachel, murmuring nervously to herself, "Someone's in the mirror. I can't take this anymore. There's really someone there." One night, she awoke in the middle of the night to get a glass of water. As she passed by the mirror, she caught her reflection, but it wasn't her. The image in the mirror smiled back at her, but the smile was chilling and unnatural. It wasn't her own smile. It was something sinister and alien. Terrified, Rachel ran from the room, determined to get rid of the mirror. Rachel, trembling, speaking to a friend over the phone, "I can't live with it anymore. It's not a normal mirror. I saw myself, but it wasn't me." Despite her attempts to leave the mirror behind, the situation escalated. On her final night in the house, as she prepared to move out, the mirror mysteriously returned to its original spot in her study. This time, faint laughter echoed from within its frame before it shattered into thousands of shards. Since that night, no one dared to enter Rachel's house. Even broken, the mirror seemed to radiate a dreadful aura. Tales of its haunting continued to circulate, shrouded in the mist of time. The haunted mirror was never just a decorative item. It served as a window into the world of restless spirits, trapping each of its owners in a chilling nightmare. Everyone who possessed it paid a heavy price, and none could escape the relentless curse it brought. Story 4. The Antique Clock. This antique clock is an extraordinarily valuable item, crafted by one of the finest artisans of 18th century France. It is adorned with intricate carvings, a gleaming gemstone dial, and an exceptionally complex mechanism. However, few know that this clock harbors a mysterious history. According to an old tale passed down through generations, the clock originally belonged to the Dupont family, a noble household in Paris. The last heir of the family, a man named Charles Dupont, was a wealthy but miserly and greedy individual. Throughout his life, Charles sought to amass wealth at all costs, resorting to unscrupulous means, even harming those around him. After his death, the clock passed through the hands of various relatives and friends of the family, but every owner faced dire consequences. Stories surrounding the clock often involve tragedies and bizarre deaths of its owners. It seems the clock bears a curse that prevents its owners from living peacefully, instead haunting them with ghostly visions and strange occurrences. Legend has it that the clock has the power to freeze time for restless souls, and if someone gazes into it at midnight, those souls will return to collect their dues. Edward Caldwell's Story, 1920. In the 1920s, the antique clock came into the possession of Edward Caldwell, a renowned antique collector in New York. Edward was passionate about acquiring rare and exquisite items, and upon learning about the clock, he spared no expense to make it his own. However, everything began to change once the clock was hung on the wall of his living room. One late night, as Edward was reading in his living room, he heard an unusual tick-tock sound emanating from the clock. It wasn't the typical sound of a working clock, but something odd, almost as if something was hesitating. When he got up to inspect it, he saw a faint figure reflected in the clock's glass. Edward shouting, startled, "Who's there?" The figure appeared to be a man in a black cloak, with a hazy face and fiery red eyes. The moment Edward turned to look, the figure vanished instantly. After that night, Edward began sensing a strange presence in his home. Whenever he looked at the clock, horrifying visions would emerge. One night, while working late, the clock inexplicably began to chime at 3 a.m. Despite not being set, Edward looked at the clock and felt an icy hand grab him from behind. He turned around, but no one was there. Edward, screaming in terror, "What the hell is happening?" Suddenly, he felt an invisible weight pressing down on him. The figure in the clock reappeared, and this time, it stepped out of the glass, moving closer to Edward. In the final moments before the clock emitted a piercing shriek, Edward felt as though he had lost control of both time and space. The next day, concerned neighbors checked on him and found Edward dead in his living room. His eyes were wide open in terror, and his mouth was agape, as if he had died in utter fear. The clock, though neither broken nor damaged, had stopped, and it no longer chimed. Laura Matthews' Story, 1950. In the 1950s, the clock continued to pass from one owner to another until it reached Laura Matthews, a renowned painter in Los Angeles. Laura, an art enthusiast, purchased the clock at an antique auction, seeing it as an elegant addition to her studio. One night, after finishing a painting, Laura decided to lie down to rest. However, she couldn't sleep, as she felt the presence of someone standing beside her. Turning around, she saw the clock still ticking, but its sound was no longer ordinary. Each chime sounded like sorrowful sighs from another world. Laura, murmuring in her sleep, "Someone is calling me. I need to help them." The following nights, Laura began having nightmares. In her dreams, a man stood staring at her from inside the clock. He didn't speak, but gazed at her intently with longing eyes, as if trying to draw her into his world. One late evening, while Laura was working at her easel, she suddenly felt the room grow icy cold. Looking towards the clock, she saw a shadowy figure standing inside it, staring back at her. At that moment, the clock chimed again, and the figure stepped out of the glass. Laura, terrified, screaming, "No, this can't be real." The shadowy man moved closer, extending a freezing hand to grip Laura's wrist. She felt an overwhelming supernatural force she couldn't resist, and in a split second, it felt as though she was being pulled into the clock. The next morning, Laura was found lifeless in her studio, her eyes wide with terror and her face frozen in horror. The clock stood silently in the corner, no longer ticking. People whispered that Laura had been devoured by time and that the clock had claimed her soul. The antique clock is not just a valuable relic, but also a gateway to other realms, where restless spirits and unquiet souls linger. Those who possess it are doomed to pay a heavy price, as no one can escape the haunting curse of the clock. Story 5. The Cursed Ring. The ring was crafted from pure gold, with a vivid red gemstone set at its center, sparkling like a flame. It was created in the late 19th century by a jeweler named Samuel Gaultier, who lived in a remote village in France. According to legend, this ring was not just a stunning piece of jewelry, but also harbored a terrifying power, said to have been cursed since the day it was made. Gaultier, during the creation of the ring, inadvertently disrupted an ancient spell he was unaware of. In crafting the ring, he used a gemstone rumored to have been taken from the ancient tomb of a murdered king. As he engraved patterns onto the ring, he unknowingly activated an ancient curse no one had dared to speak of. This curse was the revenge of the king's restless spirit, a soul that could not find peace. The ring became a conduit for the spirit's return, seeking out its owners and dragging them into tragic deaths. Over the centuries, The ring passed through many hands, and each owner encountered bizarre incidents and haunting deaths. Most who wore the ring died under inexplicable circumstances, often in their most terrifying nightmares or after being attacked by a ghostly presence that never left them alone. The story of Elizabeth Harrison, 1910. At the dawn of the 20th century, the cursed ring found its way into the hands of Elizabeth Harrison, a wealthy lady living in New York. Elizabeth, an avid collector of antiques, acquired the ring from a friend at an auction, enchanted by its beauty. She had no idea that it marked the beginning of a horrifying chain of nightmares. From the moment she wore the ring, Elizabeth began to feel a heavy weight in her mind. She couldn't explain the unease that overcame her whenever she gazed at the brilliant red stone on the ring. One night, while sitting alone in her living room, she suddenly heard strange noises coming from within the walls, as though someone was stealthily watching her. Elizabeth whispering, glancing around nervously, "Is someone there?" She then saw a faint figure standing in the corner of the room. At first, she thought it was a trick of her imagination, but as the shadow moved closer, Elizabeth grew terrified. The figure had a blurred face and soulless white eyes. She tried to rise and leave the room, but found herself unable to move. The next morning, she awoke with the ring still on her finger. However, throughout the day, she felt as if someone was constantly watching her. On the final night of her life, Elizabeth was plagued by a horrifying nightmare. She dreamed she was being dragged beneath cold earth while shadowy figures screamed and pulled her into darkness. The following morning, her friends found Elizabeth lying in bed with her eyes wide open, lifeless, although the ring had been removed from her finger. Her strange death and lingering fear haunted those around her. No one dared to touch the ring after learning of Elizabeth's demise. The story of Tom Blake, 1970. In the 1970s, the cursed ring resurfaced, falling into the possession of Tom Blake, a private investigator in Chicago. Tom purchased the ring at an antique auction, unaware of the curse that came with it. Believing it was a valuable addition to his collection, he decided to keep it. Within days of wearing the ring, Tom began experiencing strange dreams. Every night, he dreamed of being surrounded by shadowy figures with piercing, hateful gazes. One night, while working late at his office, he saw the figure of a man appear, his eyes blood red and his nose missing. Tom, trembling, whispering, "No, this can't be real. Who are you?" The apparition didn't reply, but pointed directly at the ring on Tom's hand. He felt an invisible force pulling him toward the ring as if it controlled everything around him. The next day, Tom noticed his health deteriorating. Every time he looked at the ring, he saw gruesome images of death and destruction. He couldn't escape the nightmares, and the ring's hold on him grew stronger. One night, he woke to find himself compelled to stare at the ring, as though it was drawing him into another world. Hours later, Tom was found in his apartment, still wearing the ring. His eyes were wide open, his face frozen in terror, as if he had witnessed something unspeakably horrifying. Witnesses claimed that Tom's body emanated an unnatural coldness, as if death itself had surrounded him. The cursed ring was not merely a valuable antique, it was a deadly artifact, bringing death to anyone who possessed it. Its curse went beyond terrifying visions. It challenged life itself. Those who wore the ring paid the ultimate price, and no one could escape the haunting presence it brought. Story 6. The Dybbuk Box, a gateway to the spirit world. The Dybbuk Box is a mysterious object rooted in Jewish folklore. It is said to be an antique wine cabinet, but instead of wine, it traps an evil spirit known as a Dybbuk. In Jewish tradition, a Dybbuk is a restless soul that inhabits living bodies to complete unresolved tasks. The box allegedly originated in Poland around 1910, where a sorcerer sealed the Dybbuk within it to protect the community. However, the curse was never fully eliminated. Anyone who opens the box is said to be cursed by the malicious spirit, leading to misfortune and death. Kevin Mannis and the Haunting Nightmares, 2001. Kevin Mannis, an antique shop owner in Oregon, became the first to bring the Dybbuk Box into the spotlight. He purchased the box at an estate sale of a deceased Jewish woman. Immediately after bringing it to his shop, Kevin sensed something was wrong. The box, made of wood with strange carvings, contained items like a lock of hair, a marble, and a small candle. Curious, Kevin opened it. Strange events began to unfold. Kevin heard whispers at night, as though someone was standing right beside him. Over weeks, his shop's electrical appliances failed one by one, and he frequently dreamt of an old, gaunt woman watching him from the shadows. One night, after staying late at the shop, Kevin heard glass shattering. Rushing to check, he found all the light bulbs had exploded. On a large mirror, written in what seemed like blood, were the words, "You released me. You will pay the price." Kevin started experiencing terrifying nightmares where a dark entity strangled him. Upon waking, he noticed handprints on his neck. One morning, he found the box had inexplicably moved from his shop to his home. Unable to bear it, Kevin listed the box on eBay with the description, "Haunted Box, buy at your own risk." Jason Haxton and the Fight for Survival. 2003, Jason Haxton, a historian and museum curator in Missouri, bought the box from Kevin, skeptical of the rumors. He wanted to uncover the truth. However, the moment the box arrived, Jason felt a malevolent energy surrounding it. After opening it, Jason experienced severe chest pains, as though his heart was being crushed. He developed a strange, unhealing rash on his hand after touching the box. One night, Jason heard children laughing in his house. Investigating, he saw a shadowy figure of a woman with long hair near the box. She whispered, "You cannot escape me. I am part of you." When Jason approached, the figure disappeared, but the box was open, and its contents were scattered. Desperate, Jason consulted a rabbi, who performed a sealing ritual to contain the spirit. During the ceremony, the box violently shook as if something inside resisted. The ritual succeeded, and Jason buried the box in a secret location. Yet, he remains haunted by nightmares and the eerie sound of children laughing. A grim reminder of the Dybbuk Box's curse. The Dybbuk Box is more than an artifact. It embodies a sinister force from the beyond. Those who possess it are doomed to face relentless terror, serving as a warning that some things are better left untouched. Story 7. The Haunted Painting. This eerie painting was created by a talented yet tragic artist named Vincent Devereux. In the mid-19th century, Vincent became famous for his creative paintings, filled with vibrant colors and captivating details. However, throughout his life, he lived in isolation, haunted by strange dreams and ghostly images that he could never escape. One night, intoxicated, Vincent painted a special piece. The painting depicted a dilapidated house, with a woman standing in the doorway, her hollow eyes staring directly at the viewer. The painting was titled The Lost House. After completing it, Vincent claimed he had seen the woman in a dream, and she guided him to paint her image. However, the painting was not only filled with disturbing imagery, but it also contained a dark energy. Rumors spread that it was a gateway between the world of the living and the realm of trapped spirits. Those who gazed upon the painting, trying to study its details, were plagued by terrifying nightmares, and many mysteriously died. The painting passed through various owners over the course of a century, with each one experiencing tragic misfortune. The strange story surrounding it became legend, and to this day, no one dares to look at the painting for long periods. The story of Catherine Moore, 1920. In the 1920s, the haunted painting was sold to a wealthy family in London. Catherine Moore, a renowned socialite and art collector, purchased it at an auction. When she first saw the painting, she couldn't take her eyes off it, despite feeling an unsettling sensation. Nevertheless, she decided to hang it in her living room. Just a few days after the painting was hung, Catherine began to sense a strange presence in her house. She heard faint noises, like footsteps or sighs. At times, she felt as though someone was standing behind her. But when she turned around, no one was there. She couldn't explain it, but the fear intensified every time she looked at the painting. One night, as she sat alone in the living room, Catherine suddenly felt a bone-chilling cold. She looked at the painting and saw the woman's eyes seemingly move, locking onto her gaze. Suddenly, the room went completely dark, with only a faint light from the lamp. Catherine, shuddering. To herself, this can't be. I must just be too tired. But as she approached the painting, she felt an invisible force pulling her closer. The woman's eyes seemed to not only watch, but also call to her. Catherine felt herself being drawn into the painting, as if a hidden vortex was pulling her into the woman's world. The next day, the household staff found Catherine collapsed in front of the painting, her body cold and her eyes wide open. Strangely, her eyes were not only staring at the painting, but reflecting the image of the woman, as if her soul had been sucked into the artwork. Although doctors couldn't explain Catherine's death, rumors spread that she had been devoured by the spirit in the painting. After Catherine's death, the painting was locked away in a room in the Moore family's mansion. No one dared go near it, and everyone who lived in the house felt an unsettling presence. The story of Henry Wallace, 1980. In the 1980s, the haunted painting reappeared in the hands of Henry Wallace, a famous antique collector in New York. Henry paid a large sum to acquire the painting, believing it to be a priceless work of art. At first, he didn't believe the strange tales surrounding the painting, thinking of it merely as another work of art. Once the painting was hung in his office, Henry began experiencing strange dreams. Every night, he dreamt he was in a decaying house, just like the one in the painting, with the woman standing there waiting for him. What was more terrifying was that her eyes didn't just stare at him. They began to move toward him, as if she was stepping out of the painting. Henry, trembling, whispering in his dream, "W, what do you want from me?" He woke up drenched in sweat, overwhelmed by fear. From then on, he could no longer sleep peacefully, as every time he closed his eyes, a nightmare awaited him. Soon, he began to hear strange noises emanating from the painting. Whenever he looked at it, the images seemed to shift. The woman in the painting always stood waiting, her bloodshot eyes glaring at him, as if trying to draw him into her world. One night, while sitting in his office, Henry looked at the painting and felt as though he couldn't move. He tried to stand up, but his limbs were paralyzed. During this moment, the painting began emitting a strange sound, as if someone was breathing within it. Suddenly, the woman stepped out of the frame, and before Henry could react, her ghostly form lunged at him. The next morning, Henry's colleagues found the office empty, his chair overturned on the floor. However, no trace of him could be found in the building, except for the painting still hanging on the wall, the woman's eyes staring into the empty space. The haunted painting, The Lost House, is not just a beautiful work of art, but a cursed object. Anyone who owns it must pay the price, and the spirits trapped within it are always looking for a new victim to claim. No one can escape the tragic fate when faced with this painting, and it will continue to seek out new souls to perpetuate the curse. So the story of cursed objects has ended. But do you truly believe they have been left behind? This story may have concluded, but those objects, those curses still exist somewhere. Would you dare to touch them? Or will you leave them to rest in the darkness? Remember, sometimes what you see is not all there is. A ring, a painting, a diamond might just be the tip of the iceberg. And these terrifying stories are only a fraction of the world of cursed objects you've never dared to imagine. Be careful, because one of these objects might be closer than you think.